On today's episode, we have Bri Jaynes here to tell her story of addiction and recovery and to discuss a dark side of the treatment industry she experienced firsthand. I'm Adam Vibe Gunton, and this is the Recovered on Purpose show. The black represents the darkness from which we came. The white represents the light in which we now live. And the red represents the passion it takes to live Recovered on Purpose. Today's episode is brought to you by Recovered on Purpose. Recovered on Purpose was founded with the vision of raising up an army of recovered addicts to tell their stories in powerful and impactful ways, to free others suffering from the bondage of addiction, as well as tell our stories in the school system to deter the future generations going down the path of addiction. If this is you and you want to become part of this movement, go to recoveredonpurpose.com/contact. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I am looking for some people to do interviews on this show, as well as on this platform. If you have any ideas, feel free to message me. Love you guys so much. All right, so Bri is the founder of Breaking Chains, the Whitney Project, which is an education platform to help people understand the problem of overdose and the signs of someone possibly going down that road. Bri has overcome her own struggle with drug addiction and is now an advocate for the love and health of addicts in America. Bri, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I am so excited to be on, and I'm glad to share my story with you and everyone listening today.
Awesome. So let's get into this. The first thing we like to do with the Recovered on Purpose show is basically do that relation piece. We'll tell a little bit about your story and addiction before we go into the rest of it, just so that people know that they can relate to you and basically the addiction process. So tell me a little bit about yourself, where you were when you started using drugs and what was going on at that time.
All right. So my name is Bri. Obviously, you've heard this now. And I am from a very small urban town where we have, basically a population of around 3,000 people, graduating class of 60. So I was very sheltered. I had a mother who did not do any drugs and was very, stay at home, high educated, higher middle class, and a father who suffered some, issues mental health wise, had a drinking issue here and there, and then suffered a lot of other issues as well as that. So he was a part of that, dynamic of having the mother who had absolutely no education on drug use and the father that had grown up kind of in a more lower class, lots of drugs involved kind of situation. So with this being said, it was very hard for me growing up to see the signs that I may have been an addict coming into my family, as the gene pool had already predisposed us, looking back on our generations that had issues on my dad's side. My mom's side had some issues, but it was more or less with, alcohol, which all runs into the same thing. So when I started to get into middle high school, I had really good grades. I was doing really well. I was top of my class. And then I met a guy and ended up in some bad breakup. And I started trying things like marijuana and drinking. And I was about 16 years old. And this is kind of later for people that were my age in my school. A lot of my friends had started earlier. And I always felt that I was very different from other people. I knew how to get away with doing things in a small amount of period of time without having to work for them. And that instant gratification situation brought to me that I could do things and not have to suffer consequences, nor did I really have to put the work in. So with school, it was like I would always get good grades. I had a couple friends here and there, and I felt like I just felt very different. I can't even always explain that feeling, but I started to go through a lot of mental health issues at this period in time. And I noticed I was going through depression, I had anxiety, and I had little education on that. So I didn't know how to deal with it. I have a sister who's 2 years younger than me. She was probably the closest person to me at that period in time. And I went through this breakup and didn't know how to deal with it because I had been so afraid of rejection as a teenager that I started using substances to cope with it. So this kind of started into the ballgame of smoking weed and going to parties and trying to cope with all the other things that were coming along with being a young female, having to deal with peer pressure and society and other people that have more money than you, and having, a father that spends all the money on gambling and alcohol and whatnot. And, those types of things kind of made this big storm of what was coming. So I find myself on opiates, I think within a year. I was actually skipping a grade in high school because I wanted to get out and I hated school. I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. So I was trying to get out fast and I told them that I was going to do great. I was going to succeed. And here I am not going. I'm now using opiates because I had met another guy that, of course, led me down that rabbit hole and I made the choice to use. And not knowing about them, I fell in love with opiates. And I thought that there wasn't anything that I should love more than that feeling because I could erase all that hardship that was going on internally, the anxiety, the depression. I could cover it for a small amount of time. But then as I started to clear up and I became sobered up, I noticed I would feel like my anxiety was worse and my problems were bigger. So I would continue to use every day, continue to miss school. And it started to get to the point where I was acting out to get them, and I would do things that were not myself. I became erratic. I was impulsive. I didn't care about school at all anymore. I was very emotional if I didn't have them. And I still didn't put it together that it was the drugs that were causing me to act this way. In my own mind, it was me, and the drugs weren't the problem.
Right.
So around the time I graduate, I do end up graduating. I still end up skipping. I do end up with decent grades, thanks to the help of some counselors. I had gone through an intermittent period where I quit using and got on some SSRIs, which are medications you take for anxiety. And that did help for a slight period of time, but I did what a lot of people do, and I thought I was cured because I felt better. So I quit taking the medication and went right back to the opiates. So we would just kind of get pills wherever we could get them.
And you've said something a couple times that I do want to touch on because this is something that I've noticed in myself as well, especially now being sober and these feelings coming up. And for people like us, like I see that the drugs were a common solution that people like us found for the way that we felt when we weren't on drugs, right? And now in recovery, when these feelings are coming up, basically recovery is a process of growth with how we cope with life, how we cope with these feelings. So tell me about where this ended up, where this opiate use ended up.
100%, Adam. I completely agree with you. We are learning to evolve emotionally with our feelings and learning how to cope. And that's the difference between us and people that are still using. They have not matured and learned how to cope with their usage. Yeah. So I came to a point to where I had gotten completely clean because I was pregnant with my daughter. I was in college. I managed to fail out of college because I was embarrassed about being pregnant. I ended up living, in a trailer and so forth. And after I had my daughter, I started to think that I could go out again. And that was probably the biggest mistake I ever made. And I started to think I could smoke weed again, I could drink, I could do all these things and get away with it. And within, I think, 2 weeks, I was full-fledged back on opiates. And at the same time, I was also a CNA. I had quit working at a gas station and decided I wanted to be a nursing assistant. And I was working full-time hours, if not more, while trying to, pull off this balancing act of spending money on opiates, but not trying to be a horrible parent and trying to be home. And over time, that completely depleted to where my mother was watching my daughter, and me and my ex were using all the time. And it started to get worse and worse and worse. And then we found ourselves faced with heroin when, the pill mills down in Florida got shut down. People couldn't get their scripts anymore because doctors had policies that were put in place where they had to count people's scripts. So we couldn't get them off the streets anymore. And we were kind of forced to either get clean or move to heroin. And at one point, I'm like, all right, well, if I sniff it, I'll be okay. That was what my delusions told me.
Wow.
We have this process of making it worse and worse because we become more delusional as we continue to use. And our delusions lead us to really bad places. That's why it's a disease of the mind, because it changes how we view and perceive life and our overall values. They go away and they get crossed off one by one. So I found myself using heroin, and I think within a month or two, I was shooting it. And I was the type of person that you took me to the doctor's office, and I would say no to any shot you were going to give me because I was such a wimp when it came to shots. Like I would cry. And here I am, I being heroin that you don't even know what's in it.
Right.
So my life, got really crazy. I was still working and my job had found out that I was using, and they really wanted to keep me. They knew I was really good with my patients, but they didn't know what to do in that situation. So they were like, listen, we love you. We want you here. You have the only option is to go to treatment. So we need you to go for 2 weeks to psychiatric treatment. I'm not even kidding. This is what they told me. So I was like, I don't have a problem. I just wear long sleeves all year for no reason. And I weigh 98 pounds for no reason. So I ended up leaving the next day, lying and saying I had, I think, like an impaction because I hadn't pooped in like a month and a half. I'm not kidding. That's what I said. And I went to the ER and I told them that they had recommended I go to treatment. But in reality, I had called a rehab hotline online and they sent me to Florida. So this is where my dark side of the treatment industry comes into play.
And guys, before we start going into the dark side of the treatment industry, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to talk about basically what her experience was back in 2015, 2016, before a lot of the laws have changed, and what it was that was going on with treatment centers, with us and the addiction family. So guys, we love you, and we'll see you right after the break. All right, guys, today's episode is brought to you by Recovered on Purpose. Recovered on Purpose was founded with the mission of raising up an army of addicts to tell their stories in powerful ways. If that's you, contact me. We're looking for people to interview for this show, as well as other things that we're going to do on the page. And guys, today, in lieu of having a female guest today, I'm going to be giving away 3 ladies' shirts. I am Recovered on Purpose. There's a shirt on my back for the addict in need. I ship everything I give away on this show. I ship it to you free. I give it to you totally free, so there's no catches. If you want to have one of these 3 shirts, comment below, I want a shirt, and 1, 2, or 3. And guys, we're about to go into some heavy conversations in the next segment of the show. And I want you to know that we are pro-recovery, we are pro-treatment, and we are pro-you doing whatever it is that you need to do in order to get clean and sober. We're about to go into some deep talks about some dark sides of the treatment industry, but we are not against the treatment industry. We'll see you in just a couple seconds. All right, guys, welcome back. So you've heard a little bit about Bri's story, where she came from, the small town, and the way that we relate to, the way that we feel when we're not on drugs and alcohol. And kind of all of us were seeking a new way to feel when we found our substances, and how we've kind of, like, recovery is growing away from this and being able to progress and cope with life and our feelings. And guys, so you heard where she was at right at the end of her addiction. And the next part of this is something that was going on in the treatment industry for a while. And I don't know if some of you may or may not have known about this, but Bri, go ahead and tell us about your experience with going into this treatment center when they brought you in.
All right, so I call a hotline. I'm from the Buffalo area, and he tells me that there are some Buffalo options, but they push me to go to Florida. So obviously, being an addict, I wanted to go to Florida. I wanted to go sit in the sun and, drink like Hawaiian punch and recover there, because in my mind, that was perfect for someone who's stuck in a snowy little town. So I get my mom to agree to take my daughter while I go down there, and she was completely against it, but I didn't listen to a word she said. And the next day he says, go ahead, get high, just make sure that you're down here by this time tomorrow. He pays for my flight. I get down there and it was beautiful. It was like out of a dream, So here I am from a small town now coming into this gorgeous, probably $1 billion building. Won't say $1 million building, but it was really nice. So I go in and I had told them that I hadn't used in a while, which was a lie. So they give me Suboxone and I go into precipitated withdrawal. So I wake up, I think within an hour. It's about 3 a.m, and I am so sick that I literally can't even get off the bed because I'm so sick. When you have opiates in your system and you haven't waited long enough and you take a detox medication, it will cause you to go into precipitated withdrawal because your opiate receptors are now fighting for the position in your brain. It almost feels like someone took like sticky tape and ripped it off your brain. I could explain that anyway. So I'm throwing up, I'm sick. Now, the people here did not know how to take care of me because 90% of the people in that treatment center did not have real addictions. They were people that were either posing as addicts to recruit other addicts to come to other facilities so that the person running other facilities could make money off a patient's insurance through kickbacks. And this is hard to explain to someone who's never heard it. But there were a lot of lenient policies when the addiction treatment centers became popular in South Florida and around the country. So because the epidemic boomed so big, so quick, and we put in all those policies to restrict pills and all that, we started to see this rise in treatment, and there was no real protocols taken as to how we bill insurance, how we do this. And where you find any type of money, you're going to find money schemes. I mean, that's just how it goes. So a lot of these people figured out that they could charge for, urine, whether it be the patients or not. They could charge, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get someone into a detox treatment and then have them go again so they can make more money. They work with different owners of facilities for kickbacks just for referring clients into these, rehabs, and they would hold them up in hotels, do a lot of these things to keep them from leaving the cycle that they had put them in. And a lot of these people are called marketers. I'm not saying that when you hear the word marketer, it's all bad, but there is some, illegal marketing going on in the treatment world that has dissipated over time. So when I got down there, it was one of these situations where I thought I was extremely liked because so many people kept asking me to go to their rehab or go to their treatment facility. And I was super, super sick. I quit taking the subs because I decided that I wanted to not be stuck on them when I left. I didn't want to come home withdrawing and not be in a medical environment. So they decided that I was posing as a treatment owner, referral kickback person, marketer, and they locked me in my room for 36 hours and told me I can't come out till I tell them who I'm working with. I was obviously working with no one, and I ended up flying home after 11 days because my referral person who had got me down there from the hotline refused to let me go as his marketer because you have to revoke your marketer in these situations. And he said that he was going to let my insurance play out as long as physically possible because he had paid for my flight and I was no longer going to long-term treatment. So I get home and I end up getting really bad into the legal system. I end up, being a part of robberies, involved in a lot of issues that I knew were going to put out for a warrant for me because I'd used as soon as I got home. And I took my ex and I decided we were going to go to Florida. And I found another facility, went down there. And from then, I was trafficked to many different facilities through many different people. And what I mean by trafficked is no, you're not thrown into a place where you're going to be forced to have sex, but that could happen. I'm not saying it won't happen, but that's usually not the main focus. The main focus is to keep you under their supervision while they pay you in drugs to relapse to go to a detox, and they will get a certain amount of money for you going to said detox if you are under private insurance and you are under the age of 26. If you're over, you have to have your own, because obviously if you're under your parents. So it's very complicated because when you see people that have state insurance now, there's a lot of people that can't get help. And down there, they usually do not take state insurance. That's why they're so expensive. They're so beautiful. They have spas, they have buffets. It's the type of stuff that you don't see these things being paid for in your state funded facilities because they don't have that type of money coming because they're not being fraudulent, But so we end up going, I think, to a total of 22 centers. The first one we really actually wanted to be at, but he had left with a couple, my ex, and I decided to leave a couple days later because I had relapsed and I was angry and I didn't want to face the shame that my counselor was going to give me when he said, "How did you relapse in rehab?" So I end up leaving with a guy I don't know. I am drugged, pretty much raped, left in a hotel for dead, and then I have to figure out what's going on. Well, little did I know that the guy that had brought me there actually knew someone else who was going to get me into treatment, because now this referral is sending another person to make money off him as well. So he had sent someone to my hotel, and I was with another female who had left with me from the rehab, and she had no money. So immediately she was basically discarded by this guy who claimed he was here to help us. So he takes me to his halfway house, tells me he owns it, and I didn't know what to do. It was a men's halfway with men sleeping on the floors. You know, you got 4 men per room, and he says he owns it. And this guy is doing drugs. He told me right away, I wish I could sleep with you, but I can't because I'm doing drugs. And I'm like, what kind of situation am I in that everyone around me is using, or they're all not who they say they are, you know? So I end up asking him, begging him to come get that girl from the hotel. So we go get her. And the following morning, I end up sleeping on the floor. She ends up sleeping with him. And some guy knocks on the door and he says, "This man does not work here. You guys need to get out of here." And he takes us to Palm Partners, where we had originally been. And I end up calling my ex, and he ends up getting me in there, because now I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm basically on suicide watch at this point. So I get into another facility, and then from there it just keeps going. We kept finding new people that would say, "Hey, we're going to pay you. We're going to give you this. We'll give you $1,800 if you stay for 21 days. And then what would happen is when we were done, they would send someone else who we don't know to come and offer us drugs instead, and then keep us in a hotel for a night and bring us to another facility, or hold your stuff over your head. A lot of times I would have marketers that would hold all my belongings and not give them back. So I had no way home, no identification, no way to do anything else. And I would have just left a detox, and they would say, "Hey, you're going to go to another detox," and tell them that you're addicted to every medication that that detox gave you that was narcotic. So then you would still, you would still come out dirty for these drugs, even if you didn't relapse, because you just took all those drugs and detox. So they would have you cycle out, go to another one. And then when the insurance cut out and said you can't go to any more detoxes, they send you to long term. And then they have you relapse after long term and send you back. And this just keeps going in this cycle. It goes through detox, long term, or regular rehab, long term, halfway, and just keeps going. And this was huge back in 2015, 2016. So a lot of people died. I think I saw at least 20 people die while I was down there. I saw people get shot. I was stuck homeless in Overtown, living under a tri-rail for weeks. Like, I was really just a mess. There was nothing left in me. And every time I was homeless again, because I would get mad at a marketer and tell him to buzz off because he didn't do what I wanted now, I would then go and find another one. And this just went on forever. And at one point I was like, I can't believe I've been down here 5 months and haven't gotten clean. And that was my purpose. That was why I went down there. And I realized like I had messed up so bad. So finally this guy calls me from one of the like side markets, the bodegas. And he's like, "Hey, I found your ID here." And I had been going there to cash in money from my mom while using in a halfway house. And he had called me because my number was actually sticky taped on it in case I lost it. So I found my ID and I left everything and I flew home. And my ex flew home, I think 2 days later, or he rode a Greyhound home because I think he had a warrant. So he came home. And then from there, I relapsed again. And I ended up stealing $50,000 in bad checks. I was, having random men that thought I was attractive, that were older, and that I considered predatory, cash a check for me because they would expect me to hang out with them, or they would think I was going to sleep with them, but I wouldn't, because I was just initially having them cash a check because I had no ID. So I felt it was justified. And then I would go and take the money, buy drugs with it, and continue to cycle through this. And this went about, I think, 2 months. My sister was involved, the one that was 2.5 years younger. She is, in the same situation that I was at the time. We were both using. She was just home while I was in Florida. So we both were using. My ex was involved too. Warrant went out for me, I think about 2.5 months in, since I had been home from Florida. And I was just waiting for them to get me. I was over. I was done. I didn't really care anymore. I was just praying to God, like, either do something before I die or let me die, because that's where I'm at. And my daughter, she barely knew me. I was home, but I wasn't there, and I wouldn't see her at all. My mom would have her 99% of the time. So it was one of these situations where I didn't feel like I was even supposed to be there. Like, she was better off without me. And that's where I see a lot of addicts go wrong, They're like, I'd rather be without my child because they deserve to have a good mom. And truthfully, yeah, they deserve you. They deserve you to be their parent.
Yeah.
So I get it now, but yeah. So that was the ending of my addiction. I was arrested within a day of that prayer, and I was thrown in jail. I was liberated from the abuse I had faced. I was liberated from everything, and I was so thankful. I was relieved. I was scared, but I was relieved. And it was like finally this, like, I was doing a lot and I knew it was going to be bad. But once I faced it and went through it cold turkey, I realized it wasn't half as bad as what I put myself through those, 3 years of using. And that was one of the biggest things that I needed to learn, was that the withdrawals were not half as bad as the mental hell I had put myself through to stay away from them.
Yeah. And so, did you get clean? You got clean in jail then, basically?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I had to go to rehab.
All these treatment centers, all these different detoxes, and all these things that you were taken to for all those months, and then you end up getting clean outside of those treatment centers. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting.
I know.
So what is it that do you know what's going on with the people that were doing that? Was it like, are they investigated? Has anybody been arrested? I mean, you literally just told me that 20 people died based on this stuff going on. Is there any retribution, or is there something going on with it?
Everybody says they're investigating it. I hear this all the time. This is like the thing you hear, oh, they are investigating it in Florida. But the biggest issue is they're trying to get the people that are on the bottom. The marketers that you hear of are not really the biggest issue. And I'm not saying that they're not wrong, because a lot of them are. They're paying people to go to treatment. They're doing things they shouldn't be doing. But they should be tackling the treatment center owners that are paying people for kickbacks. And a lot of these places have been shut down. When I did my Vox article, I found out that over 14 centers I had been to were shut down.
Good.
A lot of times what happens is they get shut down and somebody else uses the money from the person that made money off the same treatment center to rebuy another center and make it into something new. And then it turns out to be the same people running it, or maybe people that are affiliated. So there's a real big give and take here. We have a lot of investigating to do. We have a lot of people that need to be prosecuted. And at the same time, you take these recovering addicts that are felons that can't get jobs. They're stuck in the legal system. You offer them a job going online, talking about their story. Of course they want to do it. Of course it sounds amazing, and then they find out that they're a part of something a lot bigger than them that they can't control. And that's the hard part, because they start making good money. They start having a life, and they don't want to give that life up. In their mind, they're helping these people. They're getting them into treatment. Not all these treatment centers are paying people to relapse. Not all these treatment centers are doing a lot of the things that are messed up. But on the other end of that, you have the ones that are. And that's where we really need to crack down on these policies. And we need to look into every single way that we're billing insurance. I think a law was just passed to change how we bill insurance. And a lot of places now out of state are accepting Medicaid. And I think that's a good thing, because we have lines and lines of people up here. I help people get into treatment constantly. And I help them find places that are local, that are usually state-based. If they can't go local, yeah, I'll reach out to someone I trust and they get them in somewhere else. But it's really hard being somebody who's trafficked through the system and trying to find the safest place I'm to go. That's why I want mothers and fathers, and wives and husbands to know, where am I sending my wife? Where am I sending my daughter? Am I going to lose my daughter while trying to get them help? Because my mom never would have known what was going on, and she didn't. She had no clue through this whole thing, as she's sending me $100 to get an Uber, $150 for this. She had spent thousands on me by the time I got home, and she doesn't have a lot of money. So for her to have spent all that money on me for me not to get clean, I mean, even that at the least. And even the money I had stolen from my grandma, I'd taken 10,000 from her. Like, this is just ridiculous, because it's making us not trust the recovery world. And we need to be able to trust that this system is not as broken as it is.
Right.
Because why am I, as a person, going to living under, a bridge, wanting to go get help? Why am I going to trust someone when they put me into a completely brokered broken system, so it's hard because I get why people don't want help, but at the same time we need to talk about it so that we can fix this. And that's a huge thing. And if other people are advocating and they work for centers, not every center's bad. And that's why I try to say, do your research, look at the reviews, talk to people who have been there. That's a big thing because they are cracking down, but there's a lot more to be done. And I really hope it gets done because that's a big thing where we have lost so many people from the Florida shuffle. And now it's in California, it's going to different states that didn't have this before. So it'll move and they will find a way, but we have to be on the front line of education and awareness to know what we're talking about, what we're doing, and who we're working with.
Yeah. And to close it out, how long do you have sober now?
4.5 years.
4.5 years clean and sober after all this stuff. Guys, and that goes to show that whatever's going on in your life, however things are going, if you're struggling, recovery is possible, okay? And if you had one message to close out, Bri, for the people out there that might be struggling right now, what would you tell them?
So my page is inspired on my sister, Bri Jaynes, that passed away at the age 20. She died 2 years ago. And if you look at life, you have two examples. My life was identical to my sister's nearly. So you had me, you had my sister. I chose to give myself life. I chose the path that was hardest. And I hated it. And I went through school, got a nursing degree. I'm going on to get a BSN. You have to give yourself a reason to live, whatever that reason is, but you have to find one and you have to use your voice. You have to make the phone calls, get out there and do it. If you're in the legal system, call who you need to call, get things done. Do not sit in your shit, avoid meetings, go get it done, because this is where I see people mess up. My sister, she didn't have a voice. My sister got involved with guys that, were good to her, but maybe used, or their families, or, she got herself in bad situations and she was not strong enough to get out of them. And I can tell you that I was almost not either. I have been through abusive relationships with guys that have relapsed. I have been through others' relapses and not succumbed to it, but that is very rare. You have to protect yourself first, put yourself first so you can be there for those that need to be there for you.
Let's go. Let's go. Amen. So you heard it here. Put yourself first in your recovery. Go do whatever it is you got to do if you're in the legal system or if you need to go to meetings or whatever it is. There is hope and you can find the power within to take care of it. Guys, we thank you so much for being here for this episode of the Recovered on Purpose show, and we will see you next week. Love you so much. The black represents the darkness from which we came. The white represents the light in which we now live. And the red represents the passion it takes to live recovered on purpose.